About a month and a half ago, I flew to California to attend my niece's wedding in a little mountain community called Felton in the hills above Santa Cruz. And I knew the community quite well when I was growing up because my family had a little cabin there, and we spent many weekends and many summers around there. And the setting of the wedding was just beautiful. We were surrounded by redwood trees, and there were deer kind of meandering through the fields all around us. There were tropical flowers in the big room where we had both the wedding and the reception. And I brought a beautiful double white orchid lei for my niece, and Anna, and Ian, her husband, got a very long tea leaf lei that was woven in such a way, they call it Miley style, and it was woven with white orchids as well. It was just a beautiful setting, and also my entire family was there. All of my siblings, all of their spouses, all of their kids, and friends that I haven't seen for decades. It was really just a special time to be together. One of the things that I enjoyed most, maybe the thing I enjoyed more than anything else, was the dancing after the meal. So, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I go to weddings, it's like, no, I don't want to dance. It's just not going to happen. But at this particular wedding, everyone just kind of got up and danced. The kids, the grandparents, and it was really special. I saw people dance from my family that I didn't know could dance at all, and lo and behold, there they were up there doing their thing. It was really a fun time of celebration. There was no question I had to dance, so we were just all up there having a great time. And afterwards, I remember thinking, thank God for weddings. It's one of the few places in our culture, or one of the few events, where people of all different generations get together and dance together. I invite you to think about the last time you danced with somebody 40 or 50 years older than you or younger than you. My guess is it was probably at a wedding, if it's happened at all. So anyway, I'm at the wedding, and I'm just thinking, this is amazing. We are all dancing, all these different generations, and the music also was just wonderful. There was music that I'm sure my niece considered as oldies, music I listened to when I was in high school and college and in my young adulthood. And there was also music that I'm sure was on her playlist when she was in high school and college. And yet, we all danced to all the music, and it occurred to me that both the dancing and the music has a way, almost a magical way, of pulling everyone together and connecting all of us. We all celebrated together with the music and in the motion. Parker Palmer, in his book, On the Brink of Everything, writes these words about the older generation and how it might best relate to younger generations. We, he says, young and old together, hold the future in our hands. Let's stop talking about passing the baton. Let's change the metaphor and invite young adults to join the orchestra. Together, we can compose something lovelier and more alive than the current cacophony. I like that. And then he uses another metaphor which describes the kind of relationship that he would like to see between older and younger folks. And he calls it an ancient human dance. And there you have it. Music and dancing, the generations together, just like at my niece's wedding. It's a beautiful metaphor. And as I was thinking about it, it works so much better than the metaphor of passing on the baton. There's a few things that are wrong with that metaphor. Passing the baton implies several things that I think that we all would say, no, I really don't like that. For one thing, when we say we're going to pass the baton, think about a race where it's the relay race and one person runs as fast as they can, they hand the baton to the next person, and one thing that just doesn't make sense about that for me is it implies that the person that had the baton earlier stops completely. There's nothing else for that person to do. There's nothing more of value that that person can add. And every church I've ever been a part of, and every community organization I've ever been a part of, there are older folks that continue to contribute in ways that young people simply cannot. And we need them to continue being a part. And the young people need to continue learning from us older folks. It's really important that when we think of life and God's grace, that we remember that God's grace for each and every one of us continues. It's abundant, and we can always, no matter how old we are, no matter what situation we're in, as long as we have breath, we can receive God's grace, and in some way, we can share God's grace with someone else. So that idea of handing the baton off and saying, I'm done now, just doesn't work. It doesn't work for the church, and it doesn't work for society. We need to be together no matter how old we are and working together. A couple of quotes from the passages that Suzanne read for us. I want to just repeat for a second. This is from Romans chapter 5. Much more surely have the grace of God and the free gift in the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, abounded for the many. And secondly, from John chapter 1, from the fullness of Christ, we have all received grace upon grace. It's this idea of God's grace being so abundant, no matter who you are. No matter how old you happen to be, no matter what you've done in the past, God's grace is so abundant. There's more for you right now, today, and you're always capable of sharing something of God's grace, even if it's just a smile. A few days ago, I performed or officiated the celebration of life for Chito Isonaga, a beloved church member that's been a part of this church for many, many years. She grew up right down here in Poipu, and she was 104 years old. Lived an amazing life. Joined the Army when she was, or during World War II. And then moved to Japan and translated Japanese and Chinese and English for the American government after the war. As she told me over the last few years what her life was like, I thought, wow, and now she's in her hundreds and still giving. Here's an example. While she was in hospice care, I went in to visit with her, and I presented one of the quilts that some of you had made for her. And one of the ladies, Linda, out at the home where she was living, and we placed the quilt over her body. And her gift back to us was the most amazing smile and the tears in her eyes. And after I prayed, she prayed. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? 104 years old, lying on her deathbed in hospice care, still giving back in the one way that she could. And it reminded me that passing the baton just isn't part of the language of God's community. We all know that we get tired. We all know that at certain points in our lives, there are certain things we can't do that we used to be able to do, and we certainly can't do them as quickly. But there's always something left to give. The other thing about passing the baton that just doesn't work is it implies competition. There's somebody racing with somebody else, and the point is you've got to win and somebody else is going to lose. And that simply is not a part of God's grace either, is it? We're all in this together. And that's one thing that Jesus made so clear. God's grace is for each and every single person on this planet. And regardless of what church you go to or what political bent you may have or whatever, God's grace is to be shared. And it is not any kind of competition at all. So that metaphor of handing off the baton, I think Parker Palmer is right. It just doesn't work for us. What does work? Music and dance. So as he talked about an orchestra, I thought of some of the orchestras that I've seen where you've got people that are some of the older folks that have been in the orchestra for decades, and they are so good at playing their music, but not only that, they're good at adjusting to whatever else is going on, including the newer and younger folks that have just joined the orchestra. These are people that orchestra just absolutely needs. And then you've got the brand new people that have never played in an orchestra before, but they're learning from the people that have been there for a while, plus they're bringing new energy, and they're bringing new ideas, and somehow it's working. Now, I don't know if any of you ever watch the news or have any care what's going on politically these days, but one of the things that I've found is that we've got a new generation coming up that thinks very, very differently from people my age, and my guess is many of you. And we often don't get together and talk about what's going on in our lives and in our hearts. Instead, we decide that we know what is true, and we tell the younger folks, this is true, and you better get on board or you're not going to be on the side of truth. But if you look at this imagery of music and dance, there's harmony. And that doesn't mean that everybody's singing the same notes or playing the same instruments with the same notes or maybe even dancing the exact same dance together. But somehow something beautiful is happening because people come together and they talk about things that sometimes we find so difficult we don't want to talk to people about, especially people that disagree with us. And I'm not talking just about politics. This is church stuff, it's family stuff. When I was reading Parker Palmer's book, On the Brink of Everything, just this past week, he was talking a little bit about sin and failure. And as I was reading what he was saying, it occurred to me that people of my generation and above need to take some responsibility in terms of actually admitting to younger generations that we don't know it all, that we don't have it all together, that we don't have it all figured out. Parker Palmer was leading a workshop of professors, and I think it was during one of the breaks at mealtime. They were sitting around a table, and one of the professors shared something about a failure in his life. And I'd like to read to you just a little bit of this conversation that they had. So the professor is sharing around the table that he was going to go to medical school back when he was in college. That's what his father wanted for him to do. And yet, his heart wasn't in it, and he failed organic chemistry. It just wasn't his thing at all. And he knew he had to pass it, the class, in order to go on to medical school, but it just wasn't clicking. And here's what he said: "It was the most devastating moment of my young life." And then he went on to say, "But it led me toward a career in literature. And that career has fed my soul." He ended up not becoming a doctor at all. Instead, he taught literature at a university. and he found it such a rewarding thing to do with his life. And as he looked back, he realized that if he had passed organic chemistry and done all that his dad wanted him to do, and he had never failed, he would probably be doing some good things in his life, but not following his heart's passion. And it was the failure of that class which was so devastating to him that opened up a new opportunity for him to discover his life's joy and the richness of it all. So Parker Palmer started asking all the other men around the table, who were all professors, if they had a story of failure that was similar to that, and he said every single one of them did. And he asked them, how many of you have told your story of creative failure to your students? Not a single hand went up. Not a single professor talked about his failures. And all these students are thinking, oh, here's somebody that's just gone through life and everything's been rosy and smooth and they've got their act together and it's always been that way. Of course, when they get a little older, they realize none of us actually live that life. But here's what he said to that professor and all the rest sitting around the table. Your classrooms are filled with students who feel like failures in some areas of their lives, maybe in your classroom. Your stories could help some of them catch a glimmer of hope. So please, please tell them. Tell them about your failures. Tell them about your weaknesses. It's this idea of vulnerability. It's a scary thing sometimes to tell people, I'm human just like the rest of you, and I make all kinds of mistakes, and I've probably made more than the rest of you. But I'll just tell you, that's my story. It's definitely my story. And then Parker Palmer goes on to write this. He gets into the dance metaphor. Mentors and apprentices are partners in an ancient human dance, and one of teaching's great rewards is the daily chance it gives us to get back on the dance floor. It's the dance of the spiraling generations in which the old empower the young with their experience and the young empower the old with new life, reweaving the fabric of human community as they touch and turn. Either way, he goes on to write, orchestra or dance, intergenerational rhythms can move our hearts, our minds, and our feet, and might even help move the world to a better place. It's so important that we share in God's grace with openness and with vulnerability. Getting back to my niece's wedding, it wasn't just the old folks and the young folks that impressed me in terms of their dancing together. I'm the kind of person that likes to pay attention to people. Not only what they say, but maybe what they don't say, maybe what they write on Facebook, but I'm constantly just paying attention to people whenever I can. And I was looking around the room at that big reception hall where we were all dancing, and I realized, simply by paying attention, that we had people there who were atheists and agnostics, and people who called themselves Christians and believed in Jesus who never went to church, and others like me that tend to go to church every single Sunday and know very clearly what it is about Jesus that I love, and I talk about it all the time. There were also people there that take the Bible much more literally than I do and have a kind of faith that I would say is more conservative than mine. And then I knew that there was also people there that thought pretty much just like I did. I also knew that there were Republicans and Democrats in the same room dancing together. Who knew that that could happen? And I also know, from reading Facebook that there were people on that dance floor just enjoying the dance that absolutely love our president and have nothing whatsoever bad to say about him, and other people that had nothing good to say about him. But there we were, all dancing together, celebrating Anna and Ian's marriage. And I thought, what a wonderful metaphor for us and for our church and for the world to say, gosh, we have differences. Boy, we have different experiences. Boy, do we ever see the world differently. And some of us even want different things for our country and our church and our world. But if we can put that aside for just a little bit and allow ourselves to enjoy the music and to dance and to just to be there and celebrate the love of these two people coming together and the love that all of our families have for each other and the friends that we have together on that dance floor. What a wonderful metaphor for us to be able to say, I'm no longer going to think about passing on a baton to anyone. I'm going to ask a young person to dance with me. I'm going to ask someone to sing with me. And through the singing and the dancing, we may not still agree on everything politically or church-wise or anything else, but we're going to love each other. And we're going to understand each other better as well. And isn't that what grace is all about? Amen.